Hello there, folks. I am very sorry to do this to you again, and I hate to bring you some more of Nadine Dorries attempting to break her own world stupid record, but you're going to have to just grin and bear it, because she continues her quest to upturn every rock in the Garden of Idiots in the hope of finding the silver bullet for Boris Johnson. Unfortunately for Nadine, the silver bullet does not exist, and she's going to wander around the garden aimlessly until the end of time. The unfortunate recipient of Nadine's latest word salad is Tory MP Damian Green. What I found most sad about this back and forth is Damian Green's open contempt for Nadine Dorries and her complete ignorance towards it. She doesn't even realise the lack of respect he has towards her. Because, in the case of Nadine, there is no one home and the lights are off. The most striking element of this battering is Nadine's attack on Rishi Sunak and her seeming desire for him to be found, guilty of misleading Parliament by association? Or at least that's how it sounds anyway. You can judge that for yourself. It's such a mess of an argument and she lurches all over the place, it's almost impossible to keep track. I do have to give Nadine credit for her extraordinary debating method, however. Rather than defeating her opponent on substance, Nadine's plan is to endlessly rant until her opponent dies from old age. In the case of Damian Green, it might have just worked, but she ran out of time. Let's take a look, shall we?
Damian, Partygate report, what's your response to it?
Well, I'm only halfway through reading it, and it is damning. I see what Boris and friends of his like yours are saying, that basically the whole system is wrong and everyone individually involved is wrong. I disagree with that, because I know a lot of them and they are straightforward people. But also, I do think that if...
Well, even the one who had a party of his own?
Well,
allegedly.
Allegedly. I don't repeat gossip and rumours on television. But I think the systemic point is almost more important, that if you set up, and Boris was Prime Minister when this was set up, a system to look at something and then report to the whole of Parliament, then only when it comes down against you do you say, this is all a kangaroo court.
No. You come down and say it when it goes against you, when the evidence doesn't back up what the findings are.
I've heard the argument you just had about that, so we could go over that.
I'm 3 against 1 now.
Yeah,
there's something going wrong in our booking system too.
Yeah, but genuinely, I think that if Parliament sets up these systems and then says, oh, hang on, we don't like that, then we've got to check out the whole system. Then we would have to accept, it's a really serious constitutional point here, MPs always like to be judged by other MPs. If we are saying it is not right for MPs to judge other MPs on standards, then, OK, that's a big and important discussion to have, not with the heat that's happening this weekend.
Yeah, I agree.
But that would mean that we would need outside people to judge every aspect of the way MPs behave. And imperfect though it is,
we've already in that process, though. We're already doing it through IPSA and standards.
A bit. We've gone and
we're going down that road already.
And at every point we go down that road, MPs sort of say, "Hang on, I'm responsible to my constituents. Why is this person?"
Yeah, but isn't that because we're just so up ourselves sometimes? Just because we think that nobody externally actually understands us or understands our job or what we do, aren't we kind of, when we say that as MPs, kind of elevating ourselves above the standards that other people are held by, which is usually by the law?
I think that's a perfectly good argument to have. And if Parliament wants to have that argument and say, OK, fine, we're going to hand over all our disciplinary and standards measures to an external body, then fine. But that's not the system we have now. And if we're going to change to that system, let's do it in a calm and orderly way.
But you and I both know what will happen. We'll have that debate in a calm and orderly way, and then we'll vote on it, and everybody will vote to keep the status quo and to keep MPs marking other MPs' homework. We know what will happen, Damian.
That's not true, because if we did that, we would never have set up IPSA.
We had to set up IPSA because it was in the heat and glare of the expenses crisis. We had no option.
But I don't think this is the equivalent point, because you obviously hold strong views on one side of the argument about the Privileges Committee, and we will debate it on Monday, and Parliament will decide what to do. But I don't think it's the point where the entire country, more or less, has said this must cease, which has happened over expenses. The country is clearly divided over what happened and whether Boris lied or not. And I suspect, although Monday will tell us, that the majority of Parliament will think that as well. That this system has come to a conclusion it can live with, which was not the same as expenses. So, as I say, I think that there is an important systemic point here about who disciplines MPs, who in the end, and this is where it really sort of hits the democratic rubber, if you like, the rubber hits the road, is who has the capacity to chuck an MP out of Parliament? Should it be, clearly it should be the electorate, but if you've got something that's happening in between elections, and we've got this recall mechanism now, but again, ultimately, it's the electorate in a constituency that does it, or should it be some external appointed body?
I think the time has come where we have to say that MPs actually cannot be trusted. They cannot do it. They can't do the job. And this report, I think, is the straw that broke the camel's back. I think we now have to move in the same way that we moved to IPSA to deal with our expenses and our pay. I think we now have to move to the legal system to look at behaviour and appropriate and potentially illegal behaviour. Basically, we can't hand it to the Met Police and say that's not good enough.
I mean, as I say, there's an arguable case to say that MPs shouldn't try and discipline themselves. Where I part company with what you just said is you've conflated the offences of attending a party, which was enforcing the law, and the different separate offence of misleading Parliament. Nobody ever accused Rishi Sunak of misleading Parliament. And we all know...
because he was never called to account at dispatch box.
Hang on, let me finish. Yes, and so therefore he didn't mislead Parliament. Boris did mislead Parliament.
I don't believe he did.
Well, all right, you can disagree with the findings, but what that committee did was asked to do was to say whether Boris had misled Parliament, and they have come to a conclusion. They were not asked to judge whether Rishi had misled Parliament because he didn't. and as you just said, he was never asked to do so. So, and I suspect he wouldn't, but neither of us will ever know because he wasn't asked. So to conflate what the Met did and the whole cake incident with what the Privileges Committee did is just factually wrong.
No, it's not, Damian, because what the parallels that I am drawing is that the committee said Boris must have known, must have seen. We know that Boris and Rishi were working cheek by jowl. They were both fined for being in the same meeting. Whatever Boris must have known and must have seen, so must Rishi. The only difference is Rishi would have received the same advice that Boris received. He would have gone to the same dispatch box because it came from the same people. He would have gone to the dispatch box and said exactly what Boris said at the point that Boris said it. So,
So you want to convict Rishi for something he never did, but you say he would have done. I mean, this is ridiculous.
No, it isn't ridiculous.
You,
I
Damian,
don't.
but...
Just take that in for a moment. That is... Of all the things we've watched, all the things I've watched of Nadine Dorries, that is perhaps the most batshit crazy thing she's said. We're just taking a moment to reflect. Take it all in. So, what I said at the beginning of the video, Rishi Sunak has misled Parliament by association. I hope you know what I mean now. Truly astonishing stuff. That she has concocted this in her mind and said it out loud on television.
I suppose one of the charges you could make against Rishi is that he didn't resign. If he knew that Boris was not telling the whole truth to Parliament, but yet he continued to stand there as his Chancellor. You know, his resignation, for example, only came after Sajid Javid resigned. He does give the impression sometimes of not taking the strong position on these issues. The charge that he's weak by Labour. Yeah,
well, I mean, Labour would make that charge, and there are always pressures on cabinet ministers. You're in the middle of a national crisis. Is your resigning self-indulgent?
Yeah, it might be, but I think that's the only way that Nadine's point becomes valid. He did not resign.
I'm sorry, Nadine's point still doesn't become valid because you cannot accuse Rishi of committing an offence which he just didn't commit. So, I mean, as I say...
I'm not guilty. I am not accusing Rishi of being guilty of committing an offence. I am pointing out, I am using that example to point out the ridiculous notion that a committee could put into a report that inside Boris's head, I mean, were they in there, what they thought he must have seen and what they thought he must have known.
Damian, on this question of apologising, do you think if Boris Johnson had admitted all the rules weren't followed, I know Nadine will challenge us, but I think it's pretty clear in the report they weren't, taken his fine, apologised, instead of misleading Parliament, lying, a cover-up, he could still be Prime Minister today?
Yes.
And it's the cover-up and the lies and the misleading that's cost him, not the fact that...
But Kevin, he knew that.
It was broken. Well, why did he do it?
He knew that because he refused to say that he was guilty of something
Nadine,
that he knew he was not.
Nadine, if he's done that and it's the cover-up and the misleading,
no,
isn't he the author...
That would have been a lie.
I mean, you write a lot of books. Isn't he the author of his own downfall?
That would have been a lie. If he'd done that, he would have been lying. So now, stay with me, gentlemen. Why?
You know, normally I would conclude a video with some thoughts of my own, but I am struggling to summon any. It's been a long while since I have seen a person so completely unaware of the humiliation they are heaping upon themselves. It's actually a little sad. Mostly hilarious, don't get me wrong, but ever so slightly sad. She is only doing this because she was denied her peerage. Her determination to drag Sunak down with Johnson is all the evidence one needs to surmise the PM really did put the kibosh on her ennoblement. Even though, for some reason, she won't come out and say so publicly. Finally, Rishi Sunak doing something vaguely useful for us all, by the way. And by the way, what a bunch of sickos these producers are. They must be rolling around on the floor in stitches backstage. They haven't even attempted to book somebody who will back up her side of the argument. Although, I expect somebody like that would be difficult to find. Tim Montgomery attempted to neutralise her deranged Sunak theory there, I think out of kindness more than anything, but Damian Green was simply having none of it. As somebody mentioned in the comments on a previous Nadine Dorries video, when Tim Montgomery is playing the sensible guy in the debate, what a time to be alive. Cheers for watching, take care of yourselves.